Have you ever noticed how most of your fears are born not from reality, but from the shadows of your own mind? What if the world around you is not as terrifying as the stories you tell yourself? The moment you stop running from truth, the world stops running from you. When truth no longer frightens you, every moment becomes a revelation and every experience a doorway to freedom. Truth has a way of revealing itself in every moment, yet most people run from it as if it were a threat. The world is not frightening, it is the mind that constructs fear, spinning endless stories of danger and loss. When you stop hiding behind illusions and see yourself clearly, the shadows that once controlled you begin to dissolve. Fear only exists in the stories you tell yourself, and when those stories are stripped away, truth stands bare, simple and fearless. Courage does not mean ignoring fear, it means facing yourself without pretension. Every lie we tell ourselves, every excuse we cling to becomes a chain around the mind. The moment you dare to look at yourself honestly, contradictions, weaknesses and doubts emerge, but they no longer have power over you. Pain and discomfort are messengers, not enemies, and when understood, they become teachers rather than threats. The mind loses its dominance and life becomes transparent, unshadowed by imagined horrors. Stillness is the doorway to truth. When you quiet the incessant chatter of judgment and expectation, the world begins to speak clearly. In silence, the illusions of danger collapse, and what remains is raw reality, untouched and unfrightening. Acceptance becomes effortless because it is no longer a choice, it is a natural response to seeing things as they are. Resistance, tension and fear fade when there is nothing left to oppose, and clarity rises in their place. Living without pretense frees the spirit from the chains of judgment and fear. To exist as you are, without masks or deceit, is to experience life with full intensity. Every action, every thought, every interaction becomes an expression of clarity and freedom. The mind may still attempt to weave stories, but the root of fear has been severed. When truth becomes your companion rather than a threat, you no longer live in shadow, you move with the flow of reality, unafraid and unbound. Connection to the larger flow of existence dissolves personal limitation. When you see life from the perspective of the infinite, individual fears lose their meaning. Every moment is an opportunity to act, to feel, to be fully alive. Freedom is not escaping reality, it is embracing it with eyes wide open and heart steady. The world is not something to fear, but a mirror that reflects the clarity and courage you carry within, and in that reflection, there is nothing left to run from. Fear is not a force outside of you, it is a creation of the mind, a projection of what might happen rather than what is happening. Every imagined danger, every worst-case scenario is a story your mind weaves to keep you alert, but in reality, most of these threats do not exist. The moment you begin to observe these thoughts without believing them, you start to see fear for what it truly is, an illusion that has no real power over you. The mind constantly amplifies small possibilities into monumental disasters. A single mistake becomes a catastrophe, a fleeting doubt becomes a storm. These mental exaggerations pull you away from clarity and feed anxiety. When you recognize that the mind has this tendency to magnify, you can begin to separate imagination from reality. Fear loses its grip when you refuse to participate in the stories the mind tells. Every time you challenge a fearful thought, you weaken its hold. Looking directly at what scares you, naming it, and understanding it reveals the emptiness at its core. Fear thrives in secrecy, in unspoken assumptions, and in the shadows of uncertainty. Once it is seen openly, it becomes ordinary, powerless, and ultimately harmless. What once seemed terrifying is now merely a passing cloud in a vast sky of awareness. Fear also serves as a teacher when approached consciously. It signals where the mind is overstepping, where imagination has taken control over perception. By observing fear without resistance, without fleeing or fighting, you learn the limits of your mind and the truth of your own strength. Fear ceases to dominate when it is recognized as a messenger rather than a master. When you consistently practice seeing things as they are, the illusion of fear begins to dissolve. Life does not need to be controlled or predicted, it only needs to be observed with clarity. Each moment that you refuse to surrender to imagined danger strengthens your freedom. Fear no longer defines your choices, your actions, or your presence. It becomes a quiet companion that teaches without binding, allowing truth and courage to take the place of shadowed uncertainty. Most people live their lives hiding behind stories they tell themselves, convincing themselves that they are something they are not, or that reality is different from what it truly is. These stories are comfortable because they protect the ego from judgment, failure and discomfort. Yet in clinging to these illusions, the mind creates invisible chains. True courage begins the moment you stop deceiving yourself, the moment you see clearly what is real within you rather than what you wish it to be. Every inner contradiction, every suppressed thought, every denial of your own feelings carries weight. They accumulate silently and influence decisions, relationships, and actions without your conscious awareness. When you refuse to look at these contradictions, you hand over your life to invisible forces that dictate your choices. Liberation begins only when you confront yourself honestly, examining your motives, fears and desires without flinching or pretending. The path of self-honesty is not easy. It asks you to question deeply held beliefs and confront uncomfortable truths about your character, your habits, and your attachments. It demands that you acknowledge weakness without shame, failure without excuses, and limitations without resentment. Each admission strips away layers of illusion and brings clarity, and clarity is the first step toward freedom. Facing yourself honestly also dissolves the power of guilt and self-deception. When you stop hiding from the truth, there is no need to fabricate stories to cover mistakes or shortcomings. The mind can rest because it no longer has to defend an image or maintain a facade. In that space, energy that was once wasted on illusion is released into conscious action, creativity, and authentic living. Self-honesty transforms fear into understanding and uncertainty into wisdom. It allows you to act from a place of clarity rather than reaction. You no longer need to seek validation or approval because you have seen yourself fully and accepted what is revealed. Courage is not the absence of flaws or mistakes, but the presence of awareness and the willingness to live openly, unbound by deception, fully aligned with what is real. Truth is often mistaken for a force that will harm or judge, but in reality it does not attack, it only reveals what already exists. The discomfort you feel is never caused by truth itself, but by the resistance within you. When you fight against what is, struggle against reality, or deny what has already occurred, you create suffering where none needs to exist. Truth is neutral, impartial and inevitable, and recognizing this opens a door to freedom. Resistance is the root of all pain. Every argument with reality, every refusal to accept what is, strengthens tension in the mind and body. When you stop opposing the facts of your existence, the weight of illusion begins to lift. The moment you see that truth is not an enemy, but a mirror reflecting what is already there, fear and anxiety lose their grip. Clarity replaces confusion, and what seemed unbearable is seen simply as a part of life's natural flow. Truth demands honesty, but honesty is liberating rather than punitive. It strips away pretense, excuses and denial, leaving nothing to manipulate or hide behind. While facing the truth can feel uncomfortable, this discomfort is fleeting and transformative. Each moment of acknowledgement dissolves a layer of illusion, revealing your own strength and resilience. The liberation that comes from truth is not loud or violent, it is quiet, steady and enduring. Life becomes simpler when you understand that nothing can harm you in the presence of truth. Problems do not vanish, but your relationship to them changes. What once seemed threatening or insurmountable is now approached with clarity and balance. When truth is allowed to be seen without resistance, it empowers rather than punishes. The mind, which thrives on fear and denial, loses its ability to control you and you experience freedom in every choice and action. Acceptance of truth transforms every moment into a lesson, every challenge into an opportunity for growth. When you embrace what is without flinching, you act from awareness rather than reaction. The liberation of truth is the liberation of the self from the prisons of imagination, expectation and fear. In this space, life is no longer a series of threats to be avoided, but a canvas to be experienced fully, openly and fearlessly. The mind has a habit of creating stories that reality never intended. It takes fragments of truth and twists them into patterns of fear, expectation and judgment. These stories are not reality, they are mental constructs built to protect, to control and to predict outcomes. The problem is that the mind often confuses its imagination with truth, and in that confusion, suffering is born. Every thought that predicts disaster, every scenario of failure or loss exists only in the mind. Reality itself is silent, impartial and immediate. It does not label events as good or bad, it simply is. When you recognize that the mind's stories are optional, you begin to see that fear and anxiety have no real foundation. Observing the mind without judgment allows you to separate imagination from reality, and in that separation, clarity emerges. The act of observing is transformative. When you witness thoughts as they arise, without clinging or resisting, the grip of the mind loosens. You realize that you are not the thoughts, you are the awareness in which they appear. This awareness creates distance, and distance dissolves the power that mental narratives have over your emotions and actions. The world outside remains unchanged, but your perception becomes sharper, calmer and fearless. Illusions of the mind often masquerade as warnings or necessities, convincing you to act out of fear or habit. But once seen clearly, these illusions collapse. The mind is no longer a tyrant, and its stories no longer dictate your life. Decisions, actions and reactions come from presence rather than projection. The clarity of this observation allows you to respond to reality directly rather than through the filter of imagined threats. The more you practice observing without judgment, the more the mind loses its dominance. Life begins to flow with simplicity, unburdened by unnecessary conflict and fear. Each moment becomes immediate and true, experienced without distortion or anticipation. The space that opens within is freedom itself, a place where the mind serves you rather than controls you, and reality is met with clarity, courage and peace. Silence is not emptiness, it is the space where truth reveals itself without distortion. Words, thoughts and concepts often cloud perception, layering reality with interpretation, judgment and expectation. When the mind is quiet, when the chatter of endless opinions and analysis fades, the essence of what is becomes clear. In this stillness, nothing needs to be proven or defended, and truth stands exposed, simple and fearless. Observation without interruption allows the mind to rest and the heart to perceive. In the absence of distraction, patterns and illusions that once seemed permanent begin to dissolve. The noise of constant thinking and reacting is replaced by a calm clarity that does not depend on understanding or explanation. The quieter you become, the more profound the insights and the more effortless it is to witness life as it actually is. Silence carries a depth that cannot be expressed in words. It communicates directly to the soul, bypassing judgment and reasoning. In moments of true stillness, you experience reality without the filter of labels, comparisons, or fear. The truth you encounter in silence is not harsh or demanding, it is liberating. It does not coerce you into action, but invites you to see, accept, and align with what is. The more you practice being present in silence, the more you begin to notice how much of life is lost in noise and distraction. Every thought that arises is observed without clinging, every feeling passes without judgment. In this quiet awareness, fear diminishes because it cannot survive where the mind is fully present. Truth thrives not in argument or reasoning, but in the simplicity of direct perception. Ultimately, silence is a doorway to freedom. It allows you to meet life fully, without distortion, without hesitation, and without fear. The world continues to move, challenges arise, and emotions fluctuate, but in the depth of quiet observation, you remain centered, unshaken, and aligned with reality. In this alignment, truth is not something to be feared, it is the natural state of awareness itself. Pain is often seen as something to avoid, something that signals danger or failure, but in truth it is a teacher, a messenger carrying wisdom that the mind refuses to hear. Every ache, every discomfort, every wound is an indication that something requires attention, awareness, or transformation. When you stop resisting it, when you stop labeling it as punishment, pain begins to reveal its purpose and its clarity becomes undeniable. The instinct to flee from pain comes from a misunderstanding of its role. Pain does not arrive to harm you, it arrives to awaken you. It highlights the areas where the mind or body is out of alignment, where denial or ignorance has taken root. By observing pain without panic or aversion, you uncover the lessons it offers and see the patterns that have been shaping your life unconsciously. Pain is an invitation to deepen your awareness. It exposes illusions, strips away pretenses, and confronts you with the reality you might otherwise ignore. When faced with honesty, pain loses its ability to dominate the mind. What once triggered fear and resistance becomes a tool for insight, a way to understand the subtle dynamics of the self and the world around you. The more you embrace pain as a guide rather than a threat, the more it transforms from a source of suffering into a source of strength. It teaches endurance, patience, and discernment. It compels you to face truths that comfort alone cannot reveal. Through this understanding, the energy once spent on fear and avoidance is redirected into awareness, clarity, and conscious action. Pain does not control you unless you allow it to define your perception and dictate your actions. When its message is received without judgment or resistance, it becomes a neutral force, a mirror reflecting reality with precision. The mind that once trembled before discomfort learns to stand firm, unshaken and aware. In this state, pain is no longer an enemy, but a companion guiding you toward deeper truth and freedom. Living without masks requires seeing yourself as you truly are, without the filters of expectation, judgment, or approval. Most people spend their lives performing, adjusting their behavior to fit roles, images, or ideals imposed by others or by the mind itself. This constant performance is exhausting and alienates you from your own reality. When the layers of pretense are removed, life becomes simpler, clearer, and fear loses its power because it thrives in disguise and illusion. Masks create distance between who you are and how you experience the world. They compel you to react from appearances rather than from the truth of your own being. Every action under the weight of pretense carries tension, hesitation, and unconscious fear. To live authentically is to act without these constraints, to respond to life directly, and to trust in the clarity of presence rather than the safety of imitation. When pretense is abandoned, relationships transform. Interaction becomes honest, effortless, and grounded. You no longer negotiate your presence to meet others' expectations or seek validation. Fear of judgment, rejection, or misunderstanding diminishes because you are no longer defined by external approval, but by the steady reality of your own awareness. Authenticity becomes a shield, not a vulnerability. Living without pretense also reveals the mind's hidden patterns. Every habit, attachment, or defensive mechanism surfaces when masks are removed. Observing these patterns without self-criticism allows transformation to occur naturally. The mind loses its habitual grip on fear, desire, and resistance. What once seemed threatening or limiting is met with clarity and freedom because pretense no longer distorts perception. Freedom arises when there is nothing left to hide behind, nothing left to protect, and nothing left to prove. Each moment becomes immediate, each choice arises from presence rather than reaction, and life unfolds with transparency and courage. Truth becomes effortless because there is no longer anything between you and reality. Fear fades because it has nowhere to attach, and the self exists fully in alignment with what is unmasked, unbound, and unshakable.